My name is Lauren Keats, and I'm sitting in the back row of Narivia Systems' main conference hall, watching the woman who stole a year of my life parade around on stage like she's tech's next rising star. Brielle Tanner, our project manager with zero technical background, is presenting my artificial intelligence logistics system to a room full of executives, investors, and industry press. She hasn't mentioned my name once in the 43 minutes she's been speaking. Not even in the tiny acknowledgement slide that flashed for precisely 2 seconds before she launched into her presentation. I keep my face neutral, my breathing steady. No one is looking at me anyway. I'm just the lead software engineer who spent 18 months creating the system Brielle is calling revolutionary. I'm the invisible woman behind the code that will transform how supply chains function across 6 continents. But today, I'm also the architect of Brielle's imminent downfall. And I've timed it to the minute. The executives in the front row nod appreciatively as Brielle gestures toward the enormous screen behind her, where a simplified visualization of aero-adaptive responsive routing and optimization workflow displays simulated shipping routes, adjusting in real time, my creation, my algorithms, my sleepless nights. I check my watch. 27 minutes until the system crashes spectacularly. 28 minutes until I walk out of this building for the last time. 29 minutes until I start the next chapter of my life, the one where I win. But I should back up and explain how we got here. 18 months ago, I was called into a meeting with Jason Donovan, our CEO, and Mark Lehman, the CTO. Both men looked unusually energized for a Tuesday morning. "Lauren," Jason said, leaning forward across the conference table, "we need something revolutionary. Our logistics systems are functional, but we're losing ground to competitors who've implemented basic AI. We need to leapfrog them entirely." Mark nodded enthusiastically. "We're thinking adaptive machine learning, something that doesn't just follow programmed rules, but actually learns and optimizes from real-world data. Something that can predict supply chain disruptions before they happen and reroute accordingly. Essentially," Jason continued, "a system that thinks like a human logistics genius but operates at machine speed and scale. Can you build that?" I remember the surge of excitement I felt. This was the kind of challenge I'd been waiting for, something that would push me creatively and technically. I had been researching advanced neural networks for predictive modeling in my spare time, and now I'd have the chance to implement them in a real-world application. "Yes," I said simply, "I can build that." And so began the Aero project. For the first 3 months, I worked nearly alone, developing the core architecture and algorithms. I'd assemble small teams for specific components as needed, but this was largely my project. The executives gave me unusual freedom, minimal oversight, flexible deadlines, and whatever computational resources I needed. They understood the experimental nature of what we were attempting. By month 4, I had a working prototype that could simulate basic supply chain scenarios and learn from them. It wasn't ready for production, but it demonstrated the potential. I remember the first time I showed it to Mark, his eyes widened as he watched the system adapt to a simulated port closure in real time, rerouting shipments through alternative channels with minimal disruption. "This is incredible," he said quietly. "How soon until we can scale it?" 6 months for a limited beta version, another 6 to reach full capability, I replied. That's when things started to change. Word about Aero spread through the company, and suddenly everyone wanted to be involved. Most were turned away. Mark understood the value of keeping the team lean and focused, but one person managed to infiltrate Brielle Tanner. Brielle had transferred to Narivia from a competing firm about a year earlier. She worked in public relations initially, but had recently been promoted to project management. She had no technical background whatsoever. But she had something potentially more valuable in corporate America. She knew how to talk to executives. I first met her when she appeared at one of my progress meetings with Mark. She smiled broadly and extended her hand. "I'm Brielle Tanner. I've been assigned as the project manager for Aero," she announced confidently. I looked at Mark in confusion. This was the first I'd heard about needing a project manager. Mark shrugged slightly. "Jason thought it would be good to have someone handling the business side of things. coordination with other departments, that sort of thing. It'll let you focus purely on the technical aspects. Lauren. It sounded reasonable enough. I was drowning in code and algorithms. Having someone manage the administrative overhead didn't seem like a bad idea. That was my first mistake, assuming Brielle was there to support the project rather than to claim it. In the beginning, she was actually helpful. She organized the documentation, set up regular update meetings with leadership, and kept other departments from constantly interrupting my work with requests and questions. I could focus on solving the complex problems of creating a truly adaptive AI system for logistics management. The shift happened so gradually I almost didn't notice it. First, Brielle began sitting in on all my technical meetings, despite not understanding much of what was discussed. Then she started scheduling her own meetings with the executive team to provide high-level updates on Arrow's progress. Meetings I wasn't invited to. About 7 months into the project, I received an email from the company's marketing department asking me to approve a press release about Arrow. The draft described Brielle as the visionary leader behind Narivia's groundbreaking AI logistics platform. My name appeared once, buried in the third paragraph, described merely as one of the engineers on the development team. I confronted Brielle immediately. We were alone in the project room, surrounded by whiteboards covered in my diagrams and equations. "What is this?" I demanded, showing her the press release on my tablet. "You're not the visionary leader behind Arrow. You didn't conceive of it, you don't understand how it works, and you certainly haven't built any part of it." Brielle's smile never wavered. "Lauren, this is just marketing language. No one actually believes I'm writing code, but we need a public face for the project. Someone who can communicate with non-technical stakeholders. That's my role." "Then why does the release make it sound like you created Arrow?" She sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "This is how business works. Engineers build things, managers present them to the world. Did you think Elon Musk builds the rockets himself? This is just how the system operates." "But, look," she interrupted. "I understand you're proud of your work. You should be. But your job is to make sure Arrow functions perfectly. My job is to make sure the company succeeds with it. We both have our roles to play." I walked away from that conversation unsettled but not yet alarmed. I still believed that when Arrow launched, the technical complexity of what I'd built would speak for itself. My second mistake. 2 months later, a major tech publication ran a feature on AI innovations transforming industry. Brielle was interviewed as the brain behind Arrow. The article included a professional photo of her standing in front of a monitor displaying my code. My name wasn't mentioned at all. When I brought this up with Mark, he seemed uncomfortable, but non-committal. "The press likes having a single person to focus on," he said. "It doesn't change the fact that we all know you're the technical lead." But it did change things. Brielle's influence grew with each media mention, each executive presentation. Suddenly she was making technical decisions, pushing for features to be prioritized or cut based on what would demo well rather than what made engineering sense. When I objected, she would take her case directly to Jason, who increasingly sided with her. The worst moment came 9 months into the project. I arrived at the office one Monday to discover that a critical design review had occurred over the weekend without me. Brielle had presented my latest work to Jason, Mark, and 2 board members. They had made significant decisions about Arrow's future development path, none of which I had been consulted on. When I confronted Mark, he at least had the decency to look embarrassed. "It was last minute," he explained weakly. "The board members were only in town for the weekend. Brielle said you were unavailable." "She never asked me," I replied coldly. "She deliberately excluded me." Mark didn't meet my eyes. "Look, Lauren, I know this is frustrating, but Arrow is getting a lot of attention. The board is excited. Investors are excited. Brielle is good at generating that excitement. And what happens when they want to see the actual system working? Not just hear Brielle talk about it?" I asked. "That's why we need you," he said, as if that should reassure me. "You're still the technical backbone of this project." That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, cycling through emotions, anger, betrayal, frustration. By morning, I had reached a cold clarity. The system wouldn't change. Brielle would continue taking credit for my work, and the company would let her because she told the story they wanted to hear. If I quit, Arrow would still launch. Brielle would still get the accolades, and I would be forgotten entirely. I needed to be smarter. I needed to play a longer game. The next day, I met with a lawyer who specialized in intellectual property rights. I reviewed my employment contract with him, paying special attention to the clauses about inventions and software development. While Norivia owns the code you've written for them, the lawyer explained, they don't own the concepts behind it. You could develop a new implementation of the same ideas, provided you write entirely new code and don't use any proprietary data from your employer. That afternoon, I registered Keats Logic, LLC. I didn't tell anyone at Norivia. As far as they knew, I was still the dutiful engineer, head down, building Arrow according to specifications. And I was during office hours. At night, I began working on what would eventually become Arrow X. It wasn't a copy of Arrow, it was what Arrow should have been if I hadn't been constrained by Brielle's demands for flashy but superficial features. I built Arrow X with cleaner architecture, more sophisticated learning algorithms, and better fail-safes against the kind of cascading errors that could bring down a global logistics system. For the next 6 months, I lived a double life. During the day, I did the minimum necessary to keep Arrow on track, focusing on stability rather than innovation. At night, I poured my creativity and passion into Arrow X, pushing the boundaries of what AI could do for supply chain management. As Arrow approached its launch date, I began quietly reaching out to Norivia's competitors. Most weren't interested in talking to someone still employed by their rival. But Virexon Technologies, a Denver-based company that had been losing market share to Norivia, was willing to listen. I scheduled a meeting with their CTO for the day of Arrow's big reveal, exactly 1 hour after Brielle's presentation was scheduled to end. I didn't tell them what they would be seeing, I just promised it would be worth their time. 2 weeks before launch, I discovered something concerning about the version of Arrow that Brielle was planning to demonstrate. There was a critical vulnerability in how the system handled sudden supply disruptions, exactly the scenario she planned to showcase in her demo. If triggered, it would cause a cascade of errors and likely crash the entire system. I could have fixed it, I should have fixed it, professionally speaking, but I didn't. Instead, I documented the vulnerability meticulously and sent the report to Brielle, Mark, and the development team. Marked urgent critical issue in demo scenario. Brielle dismissed my concerns in an email reply that copied all recipients. We can't delay for hypothetical edge cases. The demo will proceed as planned. One of the junior engineers on the team, Tyler Chen, approached me later that day. Did you see Brielle's response? He asked quietly. That's not a hypothetical edge case. The system will definitely crash if she runs that scenario. I shrugged. I've documented the issue. I've done my duty. If Brielle wants to proceed anyway, that's her decision as the visionary leader of Arrow. Tyler looked uncomfortable, but said nothing more. Which brings me back to today. Sitting in the back row of the conference hall, watching Brielle perform on stage. She's now explaining how Arrow can handle unexpected disruptions, the exact scenario I warned her about. What sets Arrow apart from competitors is its resilience. She's saying confidently. When traditional systems encounter unexpected disruptions, they fail. Arrow adapts and overcomes. She gestures dramatically, and on the giant screen, a simulation begins. It shows a global map with shipping routes illuminated like glowing arteries. Then a red dot appears, a simulated catastrophic port closure in Singapore. Watch what happens when we introduce a major supply chain disruption. Brielle says, I check my watch again. 3 minutes until system failure. The simulation continues. The red disruption spreads, affecting connected routes. Arrow begins rerouting shipments, as expected. For a moment, it looks like the system is handling the disruption perfectly. Brielle is smiling triumphantly. Then it happens. A subtle flicker on the screen, a momentary freeze in the simulation. Most people wouldn't notice it, but I do. It's the first sign of the cascade failure I predicted. Brielle continues talking, unaware of what's coming. As you can see, Arrow is already identifying alternative routing options, prioritizing shipments based on urgency, and the screen freezes completely. Brielle falters mid-sentence, then recovers. Just a momentary glitch, she says with a nervous laugh. Let me restart the simulation. She signals to the technician at the back of the room, who frantically taps at his keyboard. Nothing happens. The screen remains frozen. The murmurs begin in the audience. Investors exchange concerned glances. Jason, sitting in the front row, shifts uncomfortably in his seat. Brielle tries again. While we're waiting for the technical team to resolve this minor issue, let me explain the underlying algorithms that make Arrow so revolutionary. But it's too late. The screen doesn't just stay frozen, it begins displaying error messages. Dozens of them, cascading down in angry red text. The system isn't just stuck, it's crashing catastrophically in front of everyone who matters in the industry. Jason stands up. Brielle, what's happening? I'm not sure, she stammers. It must be a hardware issue with the presentation system. But the error messages tell a different story. They clearly show exactly what I documented in my report, a fundamental flaw in how Arrow handles certain disruption patterns. Jason's face has turned an alarming shade of red. He scans the room desperately until his eyes find me in the back row. Lauren, he calls out, can you come fix this? All heads turn toward me. For the first time today, I'm visible. I stand slowly, gathering my bag. I'm sorry, Jason. I documented this exact issue 2 weeks ago. The report was dismissed as a hypothetical edge case, and as Brielle has made clear in numerous interviews and presentations, she's the visionary behind Arrow. I'm just one of the engineers. I'm sure she can handle it. The silence in the room is absolute. Brielle's face has drained of all color. Besides, I continue calmly. I have another appointment. I submitted my resignation this morning. Today is my last day. I walk toward the exit, passing between rows of stunned executives and investors. No one tries to stop me. As the door closes behind me, I hear the beginning of chaos erupting in the conference hall. 45 minutes later, I'm sitting in a much smaller conference room at Virexon Technologies. Their CTO, Alicia Mendez, and CEO, David Hoffman, are watching intently as I demonstrate Arrow X handling the exact same disruption scenario that just crashed Nerevia's system. The key difference, I explain as the simulation runs flawlessly, is that Arrow X doesn't just reroute based on predefined rules. It actually predicts secondary and tertiary disruptions that might result from the initial problem and prepares contingencies for those as well. The simulation completes successfully. No crashes, no errors, just elegant adaptation to a complex problem. Alicia leans forward. This is remarkable. Ms. Keats, how long would it take to implement in a production environment? 3 months for initial deployment, 6 for full integration across a global supply chain. I reply. David looks at Alicia, who nods slightly. We've been following Nerevia's Arrow project, he says. In fact, we just received some interesting news about their launch event today. I maintain a neutral expression. Is that so? Apparently their system crashed dramatically during the demonstration. Their stock is already down 7%. He studies my face. You don't seem surprised. I'm not, I admit. I identified that vulnerability weeks ago. It was documented and ignored. David and Alicia exchange another look. Ms. Keats, David says slowly, we'd like to discuss a partnership. Virexon needs an advanced AI logistics system, and you clearly have one that works. But we want to be sure we're not walking into a legal minefield with Nerevia. I open my laptop and pull up the documents my lawyer prepared. I anticipated that concern. Here's a detailed analysis of the differences between Arrow and Arrow X, confirming they share no code and use fundamentally different approaches to achieve similar goals. My lawyer has also prepared a statement explaining that Arrow X was developed entirely on my own time, using my own resources, and without using any proprietary data from Nerevia. They review the documents carefully. Finally, David looks up. What kind of arrangement are you looking for? Ms. Keats' employment acquisition of your company your a strategic partnership. I reply without hesitation. Keats Logic maintains ownership of Aero X. Virexon gets exclusive license to implement it for 3 years, plus a share of licensing revenue if we expand to other companies after that. I remain independent, but work closely with your team on implementation and future development. Alicia raises an eyebrow. You've thought this through. I've had time to consider my options. 3 hours later, I walk out of Virexon's offices with a signed letter of intent. By the end of the week, we'll have a formal contract. Aero X will become reality, with my name firmly attached to it. As I drive home, my phone explodes with notifications, emails and messages from colleagues at Norevia, news alerts about the failed demonstration, LinkedIn requests from people who suddenly remember my existence. I ignore them all. There's only one message. I read a text from Tyler. You knew it would crash. That's why you didn't fight harder to fix it. I don't respond. Some questions don't need answers. The aftermath unfolds exactly as I anticipated. Norevia's stock drops 12% over the next week. Jason launches an internal investigation into what went wrong with Aero. Mark reaches out to me multiple times, first apologetic, then desperate, as they try to recover from the disaster. I don't respond to any of their messages. Brielle is fired 3 weeks after the failed demonstration. The investigation reveals that she had systematically taken credit for work she didn't understand and couldn't explain. Without her carefully cultivated image as the visionary behind Aero, she's exposed as what she always was, a skilled self-promoter with no substance behind the style. She emails me once, Lauren, I hope we can talk. I need to explain the situation to potential employers, and I'd appreciate if you could vouch for the collaborative nature of our work at Norevia. I delete the email without replying. 6 months later, Aero X launches publicly through Virexon. The system is implemented at 12 major logistics hubs across North America, Europe, and Asia. The results exceed even my expectations: a 23% reduction in shipping delays, 18% decrease in fuel costs, and 34% improvement in adapting to unexpected disruptions. My phone rings on the day the first quarterly results are published. It's Jason. Lauren, he says when I answer. I think we need to talk. I don't think we do, I reply calmly. What happened with Aero was unfortunate, but we've learned from it. I'd like to discuss bringing you back to Norevia. Name your price, your title, whatever you want. I'm not interested. Jason, Keats Logic is doing well. Aero X is successful, and I own my work now. Is this about revenge? He asks, his voice hardening. Because if it is, it's about consequences. I interrupt. You allowed Brielle to take credit for my work because it was convenient. You ignored my warnings because they didn't fit your timeline. Now you're facing the consequences of those decisions. We made mistakes, he admits, but don't punish the company for them. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm succeeding on my own terms. Goodbye, Jason. I hang up and turn back to my computer, where I'm reviewing applications for engineering positions at Keats Logic. We're expanding rapidly, and I need more talent. One application catches my eye: Tyler Chen. His cover letter is simple. I saw what happened. I learned from it. I want to work for someone who values the truth. I schedule an interview immediately. 1 year after Aero's spectacular failure, I'm sitting in the front row at a global technology conference. The CEO of Virexon is on stage, presenting the results of Aero X's first year in operation. The system is now running in 20 countries, managing logistics for some of the largest companies in the world. The screen behind him shows the real-time optimization happening across global supply chains, my algorithms at work. My vision realized. None of this would be possible, David says, gesturing toward me, without the brilliance and determination of Lauren Keats, the creator and chief architect of Aero X. The audience applauds. I smile and acknowledge them with a small nod. This moment isn't about revenge. It's not even about vindication. Though that's certainly part of it, it's about something more fundamental: the truth. In a world where appearance often trumps reality, where style can temporarily overcome substance, I proved that excellence eventually finds its way to the surface. Brielle took my work and claimed it as her own. For a while, she won. But her victory was built on lies, and lies inevitably collapse under pressure. My victory is built on code that works, on algorithms that solve real problems, on a system that performs exactly as promised. As I watch the presentation continue, showcasing the global impact of my creation, I feel a deep satisfaction that has nothing to do with Brielle's downfall. It's the satisfaction of having created something valuable, something that matters, something with my name rightfully attached to it. In the end, I didn't just win against Brielle. I won against a system that too often rewards those who talk the loudest rather than those who build the best. And that victory feels far more significant than any revenge could ever be. After the presentation, I'm surrounded by people wanting to talk, to connect, to explore possibilities. I engage with them all politely, but briefly. There's work to be done, innovations to pursue, and I've learned not to waste time on appearances when reality demands attention. That evening, I have dinner with my growing team from Keats Logic. Tyler has proven to be an exceptional engineer with an ethical backbone. He's brought in other talented people who value substance over show. Together, we're building something remarkable, not just advanced software, but a company culture that rewards genuine innovation and honesty. To Lauren, Tyler says, raising his glass in a toast, who taught us all that the best revenge isn't just success, it's success on your own terms. Everyone raises their glasses. I smile, but shake my head slightly. It was never about revenge, I tell them truthfully. It was about refusing to be erased, about standing up for the work and making sure it speaks for itself. And that, ultimately, is the lesson I hope they take from my story. In a world of Brielles who build careers on claiming others' work, be the person whose work is so excellent it eventually speaks louder than anyone trying to take credit for it. Be patient. Be strategic. And when the moment comes to step into the spotlight, do it unapologetically. Later that night, alone in my hotel room, I open my laptop and begin working on a new algorithm, something that will make Aero X even more adaptive, even more resilient. This is what I was always meant to do: create, innovate, solve problems, not fight for recognition or plot elaborate revenge. The system crashed that day on stage not because I wanted revenge, but because I refused to fix someone else's mistakes when they wouldn't even acknowledge my warnings. It wasn't sabotage. It was simply the natural consequence of Brielle's choices. And my success now isn't revenge either. It's just what happens when talent is finally aligned with recognition, when the creator and the creation are properly connected in the public eye. As my fingers fly over the keyboard, implementing a new approach to predictive supply chain optimization, I realize I'm happier than I've been in years, not because Brielle failed, but because I succeeded. Not because I got even, but because I got free. The best revenge, it turns out, isn't revenge at all. It's living well, creating brilliantly, and letting your work speak the truth that others tried to silence.